everyone's Nicole and welcome to my evil blonde era. In my 30s, I decided to go full villain, so I bleached my hair. Thank you for being with me here today. I'm going to talk about my June and July reading month. In this past 2 months, I've read a few interesting books, some unexpected ones, and also some hot pieces of garbage. So buckle up because I'm starting this reading wrap-up. The first book that I finished in June was Tangled Vows by Anna Stone. It's the first book in the Mistress series. I do not think I'm going to continue with this one. This is the last chance that I'm giving Anna Stone. I've read quite a few of her books, I think 2 or 3, and I have not liked any of them enough to recommend to people because there's something just very underdeveloped about her writing. The characters are not memorable. At this point, I don't even remember their names. I do remember what happened though. In this book, we're following an escort that is looking for a new client. And in the first chapter, she meets this older ice queen, very rich woman, and offers her services. The woman finds her attractive, but she's not sure that the escort is into the things that she's into, as in dominance and submission. For the reasons that are stupid, as they usually are in these types of books, but we love them for that, they decide to fake date. The escort is going to receive a shitload of money for that, and she also finds the other woman very attractive. Obviously, as the book goes on, they re-evaluate this fake relationship and decide that they actually developed feelings for each other. I didn't like this book. This one was just as unmemorable as the other books by Anna Stone. Her characters always lack a certain je ne sais quoi, so you would get attached to them or you would remember them afterwards. The sex scenes are pretty basic. I mean, she's trying, but for some reason they always feel so wooden and choreographed in a way, so I was not obsessed with it. The audiobook was very decent. If you have time to spend, no one's stopping you, you can pick it up. So far, Anna Stone has not delivered a book that I could give a 4-star. And I don't know if she ever will, or rather, if I ever give her a chance again. This book is okay, I didn't care all that much. Then I also finally continued with the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, and I listened to the second book. It's called Good Girl, Bad Blood. The author of the series is Holly Jackson. Holly Jackson definitely knows how to tap into an interesting topic for a young adult thriller/mystery. I expected it to get worse because I didn't know if she planned a whole trilogy, a whole series, or because the first book was successful, the publisher offered to continue. And I was very much surprised because the book is awesome. I don't even know which one is better, the first one or the second one. I loved how the plots of the first one and the second one were intertwined as well, because in this book we actually see the consequences of the actions that the characters had made in the first book. We see how Pip develops, how her relationships with other people in her village develop, and the mystery thriller element in this book is so strong. I found the book so enjoyable. I was at the edge of my seat. I was listening to the audiobook. I wasn't bored even for a second. The plot twists were so tight. The plot in general was so tight. I loved it. I genuinely really liked it. I also loved the development of the protagonist. Pip takes a turn, and it's a very fascinating thing to observe. I feel like the more I read the series, the more Pip reminds me of Nancy Drew, but compared to Nancy Drew, she does all her sleuthing without the help of her dad. Although she does have a pretty useless romantic storyline, just as Nancy Drew has one. I genuinely don't understand why Pip needs a love interest. Not that I'm very opposed to it, I just don't understand the purpose of it in the series. I then picked Hideaway, the 8th book in 𝕊𝕊𝕙𝕀𝔸𝕃 series by Lacey. This is a series that is written by different authors, but it is set in the same town and all the romances are queer, as far as I believe. I've been meaning to pick up Lacey for quite a bit now. I have a few of her books. Some of them sound pretty cool. This one is on Scribd and I've listened to the audiobook. In my opinion, it suffers from the same problem as the Anna Stone book. I don't know if it's a trend with Lacey as well, if she's not the author for me, but I'm going to figure it out soon because I do want to pick up her other books and see if it's true. This one is just as memorable. I don't remember the characters much, and I've read it not so long ago. There are books that I've read 5 to 8 years ago, and I remember details of. I remember the names of the characters. I stan them. I like the relationship. This one genuinely felt very basic. I guess if you really like dogs, you're going to enjoy it more. I'm not a big dog person. I honestly am not a dog person at all. So this was not particularly appealing to me. The story follows two childhood friends that dated when they were teenagers. One of them moved out of the town because she was afraid of being outed, and she's coming back as an adult to figure out her inheritance. They meet again. Turns out that the girl that stayed in the small town is living nearby the grandma's house, and she actually buddied up to grandma and hoped to buy her house. So now they have to navigate their relationship considering all the things that they went through and all the things that remained unspoken and unsolved. The small town girl also works for a dog shelter, and she has this pit bulls that she can't really find homes for. So she offers one to her ex-girlfriend, and the pit bull is pregnant. So they spend a lot of time caring about the dog together and dealing with the puppies. As I've said, if you like the wet romances, if you like dogs and romances, then you might enjoy this book. But I felt like this book spent more time talking about the dogs than about their relationship, which was weird. There were certain moments that were interesting for me. After all, childhood friends to lovers is different from friends to lovers. For me personally, I enjoy childhood friends to lovers much more. And there were certain nuances that were fascinating, I guess. But overall, the relationship drama was dealt with too quickly, a bit unrealistically, because I definitely expected a bit more angst and a bit more will they, won't they, a bit more tension between the protagonists. It was okay, I liked it, I think I gave it 3 stars. It honestly is an okay book. The romance, in my opinion, is just a bit basic. Then I dived into my new project. I started reading the lesbian pulp fiction for video. It's coming at some point. I only read 1 book, and it was a bit of a struggle. This period of queer lit in general is very fascinating. I don't want to say a lot about this book because I don't want to spoil. I don't think the video is going to be interesting. If I do, I'm just going to say that I have not given it any star ratings. I am very confused. I don't know how to rate it. And this book is about 2 girls in New Zealand that become very close friends and kill one of the girls' mom. Something completely different that I've read on a whim with a couple of friends is Moonstruck by Onley James. Yes, so the 3rd book in the Necessary Evil series. I think in the last video I might have said that I'm not going to continue with this series, and it is not my fault. I wasn't cursed. I can't say it was cursed, but it was on a whim. It was for fun. I didn't like the book. I gave it 2 stars. I think at this point Onley James is getting very repetitive. The formula is not original anymore. Introducing a ton of characters to drag on with the series seems a bit unwise, because for how long people can read about the same fucking thing. The critique remains the same for me. The relationships feel underdeveloped because they are insta-love. This particular one had so many sex scenes as well. I don't think even she can get away with it. It was like 85% sex and 15% of plot. And I think it's a bit too much. There is a perfect ideal review on Goodreads of this book. It was camp until it wasn't, because at this point I think the series lost its charm, because reading about the same thing over and over again is exhausting. The fucking Jericho, or what was his name, was overusing for me during sex scenes. It just got so cringe at some point because I couldn't ignore it. I noticed it once and then I just couldn't stop seeing it. It was bad. I also hate that she introduced an incestual storyline that I suspect is gonna be a whole separate book. If you don't know what this series is about, it's about a doctor that decides to conduct an illegal experiment. He adopts psychopathic children in hopes of forming them into serial killers, and he succeeds. So the series is a serial killer romance series. Apparently there's one brother, we've been hearing about him, that distanced himself from the family and no one knew why. Turns out it's because he's in love with the doctor. I wanted to say with their dad, but it sounds so icky I couldn't even pronounce it. And it seems like the doctor also is into him, maybe. So that is a fucking disgusting. And Onley James is working overtime in this book to justify it. She used every single argument possible, that the guy was 18 when he was adopted, that he doesn't consider this other man his dad, that it's a serial killer romance and incest is not the worst thing that could happen in it. She's trying. She's fully trying. And I just cannot. I cannot. I mean, I definitely can, but I don't want to. So I didn't have much drive to continue the series in general, but I considered continuing it with my friends because it was a fun reading experience. But this new development is... and I do not know if I'm going to continue with the series. I think I won't. I think she truly lost to me. I read another Alexis whole book. As we know, I'm on a journey of catching up on Alexis Whole's backlist. Murder Most Actual is not really backlist. It's a newish release. I think it came out at the end of 2021, so it's fairly fresh. And this story is pretty fun because it's a cozy mystery with a strong romantic element. The book follows two wives that are currently experiencing a crisis in their relationship. So this is a marriage in trouble book, which I love. One of them books a hotel for a week stay to just relax and be with each other and maybe solve some of the issues that they've accumulated. But their plans are thwarted because an actual murder takes place in this hotel while they are staying, and one of the wives has a true crime podcast, so she's very invested in it and wants to investigate it herself. This one feels like a very classic murder mystery story. It reminded me of Clue because it has very recognizable character archetypes for this kind of story, but there was a bit of spice, a bit of something interesting with the introduction of a couple that is fighting, that is trying to figure out their relationship, and is doing it in very peculiar circumstances. I really enjoyed this. I gave this book 4 stars. It was a delightful read, and also it was pretty cozy. I didn't particularly like one of the wives. She was a bit too snobbish, a bit too moralistic for my taste, but the other wife, loved her. Another mystery slash thriller in this case that I've read is In My Dreams I Hold a Knife by Ashley Winstead. It's a beloved booktube book. I've seen it on a lot of people best of best lists, but I don't know why they do love it so much. I feel like I've read plenty of books with the same premise and seen plenty of shows with the same premise, so I wasn't particularly into it. It sounded fun at first, but I do think that there are way too many characters in this book, and it wouldn't have been a problem if all of them didn't have point of views, because every single character gets a point of view. Every single character gets up to 3 or 5 secrets. And it got really tedious by the end. The only thing that I really loved about this is the main protagonist. I consider her the main protagonist. She's this incredibly insecure perfectionist that wants to achieve so much but is so jealous of other people, and I loved her narration. This character was definitely written to be unlikable, but then there's something about her that makes her very interesting. I think some unlikable characters don't have enough depth, and that's actually why we dislike them, not because they have certain traits that are despicable. And I think the author had done a really good job with this character in particular. The last book that I read was a very delightful surprise. Passions of a Wicked Earl by Lorraine Heath was not a book that I expected to love so much. I gave this one 4 stars, but Lorraine Heath is now on my list of authors that I need to read more from. I am actually reading the second book in the series right now. No, lying. The third book in the series right now. I skipped the second one because I don't own it. This was such a good historical romance. Lorraine Heath definitely has her own style. It's definitely distinctive. The story is about Morgan and Claire that were betrothed to marry as children by their fathers, and that have to keep their promises even when Morgan's father dies, because Morgan suddenly really needs Claire's dowry. Claire is barely 18. She never spent that much time with Morgan, so she is scared of him and she doesn't really want to get married yet. So she and Morgan's younger brother, Stephen, decide to do something really stupid. They decide to pretend that they're having an affair in hopes to deter Morgan. Morgan is deterred in a way, but he's also not deterred in other ways, because he fights Stephen and decides to send Claire away to the country to care for their estate. He himself doesn't want to do anything with her anymore. He does want her dowry though, because money. 3 years later, Claire arrives at his house in London, and she asks him to reevaluate their relationship and to give her a chance to be his proper wife. He is incredibly angry in her. He has huge trust issues, and when he interrogates her, she confesses that her little sister Beth is bound to marry a horrible gentleman, but they manage to convince their despot father to allow Beth a chance to find her own husband and to give her 1 season for it. If Beth is going to find someone decent, then she doesn't have to marry the horrible guy. Claire is the one that is supposed to be her chaperone. She herself never had a season, and she knows that because of the horrible reputation that she and her husband have and the reality of their marriage, Beth is going to have a hard time finding someone. So she decides to sacrifice herself and to mend the relationship with Morgan. The premise on this book sounded so scandalous and juicy and angsty at the same time, but I don't think personally that this book is very angsty. I think it's pretty cozy. I think there's definitely a found family feel from it, because when Beth moves into the house, they start spending a lot of time together, all 3 of them, and Morgan starts developing feelings for Claire. He starts to understand her more, understand her choices and why she made them. They actually bond, they get to know each other, they get to like each other. There's definitely an angsty angle to it as well, because Morgan is dating another woman and he promised her to divorce and marry. And this woman is trying to keep Morgan and Claire apart because she knows that Morgan has a lot of feelings for Claire that might not all be romantic. They're very complicated feelings, but she knows that they could spark, they could change, and she's trying to prevent that from happening. Lorraine Heath is incredible, and I'm excited for more of her works. These are all the books that I'm going to talk about in this video. Hopefully you found it enjoyable. Maybe you found some new books you want to read. Tell me in the comments down below if you have any recommendations for me, if you read any other Lorraine Heath books, and you can recommend me something as well from her backlist. And also, if you've finished watching this video, if you reached this point, leave the emoji of whatever plant is your favorite because of this baby. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it, and I'll see you soon with another one. But until then,